The I'm Fine podcast is produced by L'Amour Media, LLC, and is run by Project Headspace and Timing. Project Headspace and Timing is a 501c3 that I started in 2017 after a veteran that I was a medic to decided to pull over on the side of the road and end his life. As an organization, Project Headspace and Timing works on veteran advocacy and veteran outreach. What that means is through the advocacy perspective, we try to connect veterans to other resources as early on into the process as possible. What that entails is early contact with veterans, forming a safety net with their family members, friends, and fellow service members, educating them on the resources, and when that veteran is ready to get help, we are there to make sure that they get the help that they need. The outreach aspect is put there to get veterans together to do productive and constructive things, whether it's out in nature, working with other businesses, anything to get them out around other veterans where those good conversations can happen if they want to have them. If you are interested in finding out more information about our organization, please visit projectheadspaceandtiming.org, our Facebook page, Project Headspace and Timing, or our Instagram, which is Project Headspace and Timing. And if you would like to donate to our organization, please visit our website, projectheadspaceandtiming.org, scroll to the bottom, and you will find a link to our Venmo. If you'd like to send us a check, our P.O. Box is P.O. Box 382, Manteno, Illinois, 60950. And if you'd like to sponsor or have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at Eric P. as in Paul, at projectheadspaceandtiming.org. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of the I'm Fine podcast. On today's episode, we changed what we were initially going to do in lieu of some personal recent events. My mother passed away about a week and a half ago from the date of this recording. And when that happened, I reached out to Brad and Melanie because they'd both been through something very similar in that they'd also lost their parents. All of us have lost a parent in a very different way. And so today's episode, we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to share our individual stories, compare what the grieving process was like for each of us, based on the situations, the differences between all of them, the similarities, and then to talk about how we've been doing with it. So thank you again for tuning into this episode of I'm Fine, episode 7, I'm Fine with Losing a Parent.
Welcome to the I'm Fine podcast with your freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional hosts, Eric Peterson and Brad Stozick.
Okay, so this is going to be a super uplifting, positive episode. We talked about that.
Yes.
Unofficially sponsored by Kleenex, probably, which is sitting right here. And I told you guys before that I fully plan on having my fucked up sense of humor shining through here, because that's honestly how I've been kind of dealing with everything, And I really appreciate both of you guys being willing to be here and to talk about, the shittiest situation, if not one of the shittiest situations anybody could ever go through.
Absolutely.
So to get started again, and I'm here obviously with our co-host Brad and our resident LPC Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. What we wanted to start out doing was first we just wanted to share our individual stories. And then after we share our stories, we're going to get into it and talk about the differences and similarities and all that other kind of stuff. So as you guys that are listening hopefully remember, every episode I would always give a shout out to my mom because my mom would always listen. I brought Brad over a couple of times when I would pick you up and we would go over to my mom's house because I was caring for my mom, helping care for my mom while she was on uplifted care, which is our version of hospice. And you told me a couple of times, you had a hard time going in there.
I did.
Just because it brought some shit back for you too, because your father passed away in May, right?
He did. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So still pretty fucking fresh.
Yes.
Yeah. And the second time I brought you over to my parents' house, my mom was like, "Hey, Brad, I like the podcast."
Yes.
She was talking to you and everything.
Yes.
So in June of this year, My mom was she called me because she had stomach pain. And my mom battled myelofibrosis in like 2014 when I was in Afghanistan. And so we already went through that shit once. And so as soon as she told me that she had the stomach pains, I told her, go to the hospital, like get that shit checked out. I talked to my dad. My dad was like, yeah, let's go. So they went to the hospital. They found that there was a blockage. When they did the removal, they found cancer. And so like my dad called me and I was at a fucking golf outing and I remember he called me to tell me that they found cancer in my mom's somewhere in her stomach lining. And again, when you hear those types of things about your parent or going through anything like that, that moment just gets framed in your fucking head, right? Yep. For like ever. And so like I said, I was at a golf outing. My dad told me they found cancer. And I said to myself, there's nothing I can do right now because my mom was sleeping at the time. But I was going to go visit him in a couple hours and try to finish the outing. And I was golfing with a good friend of mine, Rob. And Rob looked at me and he was just like, man, listen, if you got to go, you got to go. And for a second, I was almost an autopilot, like a chicken with its head cut off. Like I just didn't really know what was going on. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And I went up to the next, hey, I just plugged the podcast out. I didn't even mean to. I go up to the tee box. I hit the drive, and it was a terrible drive, which has nothing to do with what was going on and everything to do with the fact that I'm a terrible golfer. And then it hit me after that drive. And I walked up to Rob, and I looked at him, and all of a sudden I just started crying. And he gave me a huge hug. And he was like, dude, just get the fuck out of here. And so I left. And so that started the process. So she was in and out of the hospital. They were trying to figure out what was going on, if they could do anything, exploratory surgeries, all this other bullshit, chemo, everything. Like, we threw everything we could at it. And over the course of 5 months, it got worse and worse. She was transferred up to a cancer hospital, Edward, up in Naperville. We talked about that. Yeah. They were fucking outstanding.
Great hospital.
Oh my God. And then after that, we were told that she needed to be on hospice, which another punch in the gut.
Yeah.
Right. And so she came home. She was on our version of hospice, which is called Uplifted Care, another outstanding organization. And she was on, they thought that she was going to be here for days. They said when she was going to go home on hospice that it was going to be days to maybe weeks. And she came home and she was here for around 2 months. Like she was getting stronger and like bodily functions were coming back. She was doing really good. And then 2 weeks ago, I got COVID. My wife and I both got COVID. And so that took me out of commission. Obviously, the second it hit my household, because I'd visited my mom every single day she was on Uplifted Care. She was on home hospice every single day with the exception of, I think, 2 days. And I was there from once a day to 3 to 4 times a day. I stayed overnight so my dad could go and take a little trip to get out of his head. Like, I was in it. You know what I mean? And when I got hit with COVID, I told my parents, hey, I don't want to be around you guys just because obviously this is very significant. Right. So that was like on a Wednesday. And then my dad hit me up Saturday morning, another moment, sends me the message, Eric, are you awake? At like 6:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And you just get that feeling in your gut where you're like, fuck. Mm-hmm. And so I called him and my dad is like a very strong, emotionally strong guy. And he just, his voice was breaking a little bit. And he just said that, your mother had passed in her sleep. I already notified Uplifted Care. They're on their way. And I would like you to be here. And I told him, obviously, I'm still dealing with the COVID. And he was like, I don't give a shit. And I'm like, good. I just want to make sure because I also don't want to get my dad sick. And so donned my mask on, everything like that, ran over to my parents' house, walked up to the door, still dark outside, opened the front door, and there's my mom, on the chair. And Uplifted Care was there going through everything. And it's crazy how it's a business. It's not like, I'm not trying to make it sound shitty, right? Yeah. But they need to go through the administrative side of things. And meanwhile, you're still trying to process what the fuck is happening right now. Yep. And then, and so that, my dad told me that my mother had passed peacefully in her sleep. that he had woken up to go to the bathroom, and he noticed that he wasn't hearing her breathing like she normally was, and then he checked on her, and that's when he knew. So that is what happened, and that was not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. So, Brad, what about you, man?
So my dad, let's see, he got sick. He went in to the emergency room beginning of April with like a really bad cough, thinking it was COVID, bronchitis, whatever. So he went in beginning of April. They admitted him. And the thing with my dad is like, it's almost like the doctors knew it was something, but they're like, oh, we got to do the tests. We got to do some tests. We can't see this. We can't do that. So he stayed at a local hospital for a couple weeks. And then they came in, they're like, hey, we have a test. It's about 75% accurate. If we transfer you up north, it's about 95% accurate. And then we'll let you decide. And at this point, he was still in good spirits. He was still like up and sitting and, good spirits as you can be.
You said this was in April, right?
April. Yeah, this was April. And then he got transferred like middle of April. And then once they transferred him, he got worse almost. And he did 1 round of chemo. After they transferred him, they found out what it was. It was small cell lung cancer, which is caused by smoking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what they found after they finally found out what it was, they found a grapefruit-sized tumor in his right lung, a cluster of pea-sized tumors in his left lung, and they were afraid that it also spread to his liver. And so there came to a point where they did his scans, and they didn't even like check certain parts because they were so focused on, a grapefruit-sized tumor in your lungs.
Yeah.
So he did 1 round of chemo, and then he was pretty much like, "Fuck this, I'm done. I don't want to do it." And then he made a decision to come home and just ride it out for the rest of his days. So he moved in with my sister into her house and her kids and her family, which was nice because it was right down the street from my house. So I was able to be there, every single day. So yeah, he came home beginning of May. He was doing better, and you get that like little ray of hope that he's going to do good and he's going to be better. And then, just one day he was good, and then he probably had 20, 30 people come over, the day. And then the next night he just passed. And the worst part for me, he passed at 9:17.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hospice nurse was there, and she confirmed it. And she goes, well, we have to wait for a doctor for it to be official. So the doctor didn't show up until I think it was 10:15. So it was over an hour later. And then the nurse is like, well, do you guys want like a mini service or anything? And we're like, well, yeah, sure. Well, pastor or preacher, they didn't show up until it was like 12:45 in the morning. So my mom shows up, my dad's sister and her husband. So everybody's at his house. We're just sitting here waiting for this preacher to do the service. My dad is just laying in the hospital bed in the middle of the living room. It just looks like he's sleeping. And it's just like we're having a conversation at the dinner table right next to my dad. And it's just like, it's just so surreal that just, I don't know, an hour prior to us, he was having a conversation with us. And then that was it.
It's weird how your brain works.
Yeah.
Just because you're sitting there and you're trying to have a conversation. Because we did the same thing with my mother. Like she was there and she was in my house or my parents' house for a few hours before the coroner got there. And it's like you said, you put it perfectly. It's fucking surreal.
It's uncomfortable. And I get like people have a job to do, but he passed away at 9:17 p.m. Why did they not take him until like 2:45 or something crazy? Like
9:17 p.m.
p.m. They took him like 2:45 like a.m. So it was
I don't think no matter what way you go about it, it's just, it sucks.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they're doing from a business perspective, because I'm sure that they have, obviously, they're dealing with other patients, other people. And it's just like, but for you to kind of sit there with your parent that's passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing to wrap your mind around, because your brain's definitely not functioning at 100%.
No.
You know what I mean?
And it was late. You know, you got like I'm already lack of sleep from being there.
Yeah.
I mean, I was there. I would stay the night. Like you said, all day. It was exhausting. I was there all day, every day.
Now, Melanie,
Yes.
you shared your story briefly with me when we were grabbing coffee one day.
Yes.
And very, very different from the experience that Brad and I had. Would you be comfortable sharing what happened with your mother?
Yes. So I turned 18 in 2005. 4.5 weeks later, left for the military. Like, it was pretty quick. And so the following summer, July, I'd gotten through basic, AIT. I was Fort Benning, my first duty station. And a big part of this for me, unfortunately, is blacked out. I've tried in therapy to like do different things to like recover it, but parts of it are choppy. I remember being told that she was gone, and it took me a moment to process, because she wasn't sick. Nothing was amiss to my knowledge. And so that took me a moment to like really process. And then I remember being told that it was a drunk driving incident. And so I just kind of remember, I remember a lot of screaming initially. Like, I was very angry because, unfortunately, I knew the person. It was her boyfriend at the time. And what had happened is they had gone out, they were drinking, and they got on a four-wheeler, like an RV, and they were navigating like a wooded terrain area, and he had been drinking quite heavily. My mom was on the back, and he went to navigate a turn, and he jolted the RV. And as he jolted it, my mom flew off the back, hit her head on a tree, and died instantly. And so I just remember screaming and threatening a lot. Like, I'm going to kill this individual. Like, it was just, I saw red, and then, and then had to travel home to bury my mom in uniform on July 3rd, which is a day that everyone in the world wants to stop you in the airport and hug you and shake your hand and thank you for your service. And I'm just like, on my way to bury my mom, and like, this is such a weird, like, it was such a surreal time. So yeah, very, very different from the experience you guys both had of, which sounds, man, I can imagine Brad like having to sit there, and Eric like being able to walk up and like see your parent, and like in that, like in passing, like that sounds really tough. So yeah, I had a very different experience from that.
Well, and like we talked about, it's not about like whose situation was better. Like, they all fucking suck.
Yeah.
Like, every one of them sucks.
Yeah.
For sure.
But like, I couldn't imagine. So for me, over the course of 5 months, and then receiving a terminal diagnosis from the doctor and all this other shit, you're preparing yourself, and you're in this weird place. Like, I was in this very weird place of hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, trying to prepare myself like, hey, I need to be ready if this happens. I have a very close relationship with my mother. Like, I was a mama's boy for sure. I don't give a fuck. Who knows that? Like, I wear that badge of honor. And so you're trying to prepare yourself because you know how heavy it's going to be when it happens. But then you're also trying to be hopeful at the same fucking time, which just mentally is a weird place to be at, because you're just like, you're hoping that she's going to get better. And you're telling yourself, hey, you know what? Like, maybe she's going to make it. Maybe she's going to be okay. You know what I mean? And you're running in this weird it's so strange how it stretches out like that. But if something happened like in Melanie's situation where it's so immediate, like you're talking about seeing red. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know. And it makes sense how it's so interesting how the brain works in that your brain just says, hey, guess what? We're going to black a lot of this shit out. Okay. Like, and this is for you. You know what I mean? Because I don't know. I would have been, you reach a new level of anger, I would imagine.
Yes.
That's untappable, like from any other way.
Yeah.
And then to put yourself in a situation following that where you're now coming home, you're in uniform and people are walking up to you. Was it almost like an out-of-body experience?
Oh, I was disassociated for like the first 72 hours afterwards because I got on the plane immediately and just everything was, it was like I was moving in slow motion outside my body watching this happen to someone else. Like there was no way this was my reality. This isn't happening to me. Like this doesn't happen to me.
And that, that denial is so, like I didn't deal with the denial that much through the process, like while my mom was, you know, in hospice and everything. But then immediately following it, like Brad said it best, the only word I can think of is surreal.
Surreal.
Because you're just trying to wrap your mind around it. You're like, there's no way. I've known this person literally my entire life. This person's always been there. It doesn't make sense to me that I now exist in a world where this person isn't there anymore. That doesn't fucking make sense to me. I can't, that doesn't compute here.
Right. How do I function in that reality? Like,
Yeah. And so to have that, and I had a similar moment in that we had all the funeral, the visitation flowers in my garage. And the way that I process with things, like I've told you guys before, is I try not to run from it. Like I try to just let myself have the feelings, have the emotions, and deal with it in the moment. And so following the visitation that weekend, you know, not doing great. Okay. I had a lot of support from my friends and family, which I'm so appreciative of. But yeah, I wasn't doing great. And so I was looking very disheveled, you know what I mean? And just bumming around my house, just kind of throwing my body into it and just letting myself feel everything. So I walk into the garage, I open the garage door, I go into my car that's out on the driveway to grab my mom's some things from the visitation that I still had in my car. And I go and I grab them and I walk into the garage, and I'm not going to say who, but a person that's running for a political position right now pulled up and was just doing their job in walking around and knocking on doors. And it would just so happen that this person saw me and walked to my garage and handed me something and introduced themselves and said who they were and what they were doing. And I felt like I think I felt maybe similar to what you felt in that airport, in that I just stared at this person blankly, and I'm trying to put words together. I look like a homeless person that's squatting in my house. Like I'm wearing the same clothes I wore the day before. Like it's clear I'm not doing great. And I just kind of like took it from them and like said I don't even remember what I said. And then the person kind of looked at me, and it was clear that they knew that something was up with me. Obviously, they're not in the position at that point to talk to me about stuff. We don't know each other. And they're just like, okay, well, you know, thank you very much for your support, and leave. And I just felt like embarrassed for a second. And then I'm just like, I shouldn't be embarrassed. I'm at my own fucking house. Yeah. But it's an out-of-body experience when people are trying to talk to you and you're just, you're not there. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And now, so that happened when you were 18.
18, yes.
So the grieving process for you, and what was it like initially, and where are you at with all of it now?
So initially I went through, I remember denial. Like I remember specifically being stuck in a state of denial and disassociation for kind of crossing between the two for a while. And then I went into like the pleading stage. I don't know if either of you guys experienced that, you know, like I'll do anything. Like I'll make a deal with whoever, Jesus, the devil, the flying spaghetti monster, like bring them back. Like I went through all of that. But at the same time, I was 10 months into my military like career and start. And so as you guys know, when you go through, basic and AIT, they like break you down to rebuild you. So I had just been through like this emotional mental roller coaster. And then as the roller coaster comes to an end, I get off and find out that my mom died. And so it was a very surreal experience. And I remember the next time the grief, like it didn't hit me that much at the funeral. It didn't hit me that much while I was back for everything. But I specifically remember coming back for the first formation after I came back after my mom's funeral. And I had a platoon sergeant who at the time terrified me, like just very stone-faced, non-emotional, like scared me to death. And I'm still only 18 years old. And so I'm standing there and he came and he's coming down and I'm at, the end. And he said something to be like asking if I was okay.
Did he know?
He knew.
Okay.
And the way he asked it, it was the first time I saw the human side of him. And so I broke. Like, that was it for me. Like, that was it. And I stood there and I remember kind of gulping and the tears started coming. I was like, I'm good. I'm good. I was not good.
Yeah.
So, but you're in the military and I'm active duty and you're mission ready. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to like sit around and be sad and grieve. And so I jumped into kind of living recklessly. Like I didn't care at that point. I was like, if my mom isn't here, then I don't care what happens to me. And so I did go through an extended period of time of definitely living on the edge, not caring about situations I put myself in, people I surrounded myself with, things I did. I just did not care. And then it actually took, I'm trying to think. I did my EMDR training in 2019. And we kind of sort of tapped into something around my mom when we were in the training. And that's when someone does it to you. So I was having it done to me. And I remember something switched in that moment. And they said to us, if something felt like it really came up today and we weren't able to process through all of it, we highly recommend that you go find someone who does EMDR and finish that. And so I was like, that feeling, like I knew, I was like, I got to find somebody. And luckily I found someone relatively quickly. And I did progressive EMDR. So I went 2 days a week for 8 weeks and just focused on what happened with my mom and processed everything. And so that was 3.5 years ago. So for a very long time, held on to everything, didn't process, and then finally was able to go through everything, feel all the stages of grief real time, go through, everything that had happened in that moment and like cry about it for the first time and like feel through it for the first time. So yeah, it was a very odd experience for me just because of my situation at the time. So because
you were actively serving.
Yeah.
And I feel like one thing that you brought up that I agree with, it's like in the military, whether you want to or not, I mean, you kind of have to compartmentalize shit. Like when you're out, when you're running missions, rolling outside the wire, whatever the fuck you're doing, like it, unfortunately, like almost, this sounds so callous, but like it almost doesn't matter what fucking happened.
Right.
Because when you roll outside the wire, guess what?
Mission focused.
It's life or death time.
Yeah. And
if anything gets in your head and throws you off your A game, then that means it could be a bad day for fucking everybody.
Yeah.
And so when I found out my mom had myelofibrosis and I was in Afghanistan with the DOD, like I found out about it and I just went into my room and I cried for like 2 hours and because I was thousands of miles away.
Yep.
And then I got my shit on and went on mission because I had to go on mission. I had to leave that shit in my room. You know what I mean? And so, but what you were saying, if I understood this correctly, was like, because of that, you get to put that almost on the back burner because you have to focus on what you're doing, your job in the military, all that other kind of stuff. And then it turns into this thing where now it's kind of growing back here and it's getting kind of scary and it's getting a little bit more intimidating. So I don't want to deal with it right now. I'm going to find something else to focus my mind on. And then here you are fucking however many years later and you're like, wow, I haven't dealt with any of this shit?
Yeah.
Like, was that sort of what happened with you
Yeah.
up until when you did that EMDR?
Yeah. Like it was always festering. It would manifest through me in different ways in my behaviors and my emotions and the relationships I had with people, the connections I was able to make, my behavior at times. And then as we started to unravel it through the EMDR and I went back to that initial experience and I felt the changes happening like real time, I was like, man, like I can't believe this has been sitting in the back all this time. Like it was a lot. Like I said, 2 sessions every week for 8 weeks, just talking about that and sorting through everything. So it was intense to unravel it all.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Couldn't imagine.
Yeah. It was all over the place. So I went through the anger. I went through the grief. I went through, the stages, that you go through in grieving, but over 10 years later. So it was just very surreal because I dabbed in those feelings, real time, but had to, compartmentalize and shut them off immediately. So to be able to really go through it all again over 10 years later was surreal, but very healing. So,
well, I was going to ask, based on your career, does that make the process easier, harder? No influence? Like, what's your opinion?
So for me, having been through it, it's obviously a modality that I now hugely vouch for because of what it did for me. But then obviously there's times where people come in and they're wanting to do EMDR and their trauma is similar to mine. And that's the point at which I have to sit back and say, okay, well, is any transference going to happen here or countertransference, which is where like it can kind of make the therapeutic relationship less stable because the therapist's emotions are really kind of more invested in the client than they should be. And like there becomes this kind of odd boundary that gets crossed. And so I have to really reevaluate, like, can I help this person given my personal history, or is it more clinically and ethically appropriate to say, hey, you're going to have to see somebody else. Like I can't unfortunately help you because of, there's a similarity there and I'm not in an emotional place to be able to do that.
That's got to be insanely hard to draw that line because it's not very, it doesn't seem like it's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's more or less just constant reassessment.
Yep.
Right? To see where like you're at and where they're at and then trying to make that understanding. But God, that sounds insanely hard.
Yeah.
Brad,
Yes.
now as far as like how the grieving's been for you, what was it? When did you and I get together after it happened? How soon after did you and I told you to come over to my house and we just kind of hung out in the garage?
I think it was the next day.
Yeah, I think it was.
I think it was the next day.
Yeah, you told me, and I was just like, I don't know how else to help somebody in any grieving process.
Yeah.
But all I remember is like back in the day when we lost a very good friend of mine, we all just, we get together. We are like, hey, like, I'm going to go pick up a case of Bud Light. We're going to go sit in your fucking garage and we're just going to bullshit about nothing and everything.
Yep.
So what was the grieving process like for you after your dad passed? Because you were helping care for him for about a month.
Yep.
Right before it happened. So what was that like after?
So for me, when it happened, I was there. So seeing his face as he took his last breath and his eyes go lifeless and just watching him, die is like, that's hard. Like that's hard because I replay that in my mind like 3 to 7 times a day.
Yeah, holy fuck.
Every day.
Yeah.
So as far as grieving, I don't know. I go in cycles, right? So I'll be like, oh, it's okay, and I'll think of a good memory of my dad, and I'll laugh and like ha ha ha. And then there's days where I will scroll through my contacts and I just want to call him, and I'll listen to his messages that from whenever, and the same message. And I love, like, I don't know about your guys' parents, but my parents, they're still in that time where I don't think they realize that phones have caller ID and stuff. So every single message, hey bud, it's dad. Like I got it. Like I know.
Yeah.
But it's just like, so I'll find myself just re-listening to those messages, and it's a cycle, man. I'll be good some days, and then just lately I don't want to get out of bed. I feel like I can't continue with anything. I just want to give up on school, just want to be a hermit and just cry and just.
Because it's still so fresh too, because that was just in May. And one of the things that you just brought up too, if I could elaborate or kind of talk about too, what you mentioned about the voicemails.
Yeah.
Is like, there is like a new level of kind of depression and sadness you feel after you've lost a parent, and now you're frantically looking through your voicemail so you can hear their voice again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And because I did the same thing, because I think that's just a parent thing, where like a parent calls you, and even though you have the same number and they've had the same number as long as you've known them, they're like, "Hey, it's your mom." I'm like, I know, Mom. I got your number saved. Like, I've had your number saved. But like, I remember I was sitting in the bathroom and I was scrolling through my phone looking for voicemails to hear my mom's voice again.
Yeah.
And I realized that I deleted some, you know what I mean? And I broke down from that.
Yeah.
You know, and even though like I deleted them because you only have so much fucking space in your mailbox.
Yep.
And so you're sitting there going through deleting them, and then you can't hear them anymore. And then like that, I mean, that's really tough. And so now it's been however many, was it 5 months, 6 months?
About 5 months, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the worst part is the days after, because afterwards we spent a lot of time just at my sister's house and just there was all the equipment just sat there.
Yeah.
And you just sit there and I remember just the next day walking, my mom was over and we like sat on the couch. And I think I'd gotten like 46 minutes of sleep that night.
Yeah.
And I walked in the house and I just sat at the end of the hospital bed and I just stared at it. And we were going through his stuff later, and the same day, my sister, I don't remember what, but I had used my dad's phone to call my sister's phone, dude, and she like lit up, you know?
Yeah, dude.
And I was like, Michelle, like,
yeah,
it's me, you know? And it's just like,
all of those things.
Oh, man.
One thing that I've realized is, you know, as far as like wanting to cry and like crying and having those emotions, is like, you almost think you can control when that shit comes up, but guess fucking what? Like, I've cried doing like literally everything in my house, like just doing something fucking random. And the moments where I think that I'm going to try to allow myself to have the emotional response that I should is like, I'll go to the park and I'll go walk just by myself, and like I feel better out there, and but I won't have that heavy drop to your knees type of response out there. Like, I'm out there, I'm processing things. I'm hoping that I have that because I'm by myself. That's what I'm going out there to do. But it's like when I'm at home, you know what I mean? And I'm just doing something random and I see something and I'm like, oh, that's something that my mom got us. Or, when we purchased this thing, my mom was here. And like those little types of moments. And then all of a sudden, yeah, I'm done. You know what I mean? And I had a couple of days where I've just needed to, like, and luckily my wife Ashley is very much understanding, where I've just like, listen, can you just watch the kids right now? Like, I'm just going to go upstairs and lay in our fucking bed for a little bit and go through some stuff. And she's like, yeah, you do what you got to do. Because the day before the visitation, like, giving the eulogy for your parent is also just one of the weirdest fucking feelings in the world.
Yep.
And the day before, like, I was so stressed out that like my jaw is still in pain, but I was clenching my jaw so much at night. I didn't even realize it. Yeah. And I was just dealing with the fucking pain. And so the day before I was trying to write the eulogy and I was like having a hard fucking time doing that. And then, like, you know, I had a little bit of I cried a little bit, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then I get a phone call from a dude that I deployed with. He lives in St. Louis, and he gave me a call, and he's like, hey, man, I just want to check on you. How you doing? And I told him, you know, and he just said, okay, well, and I haven't seen him in like 6 months to a year. We talk every once in a while, but we were roommates together in Afghanistan on our first tour, so we'd been through some shit together. And he goes, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I'm on my way. And I was like, ugh. I fucking lost it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when feeling that you have that kind of support from people too makes you cry, like made me cry. And when he told me that he was coming up from St. Louis and I had talked to him in fucking 6 to 8 months and he just found out what happened, like, you know, and I just broke down again. And your body's so funny because it's like, you think you're done crying. You're like, I can't have any more tears. I've stopped drinking water. Like, there's no fucking way. And then your body's like, surprise, bitch. And you just, bleh, and you're like, where are these fucking tears coming from still?
Yeah.
But so do you think that having your dad, being able to kind of care for him for about a month, was that helpful? Do you think in your process of grieving, in that it gave you some time, or was it not? What do you think?
So I think emotionally, like because with like my visual impairment, like I said on previous episodes, I was there, but I didn't really get to like help him because he didn't think I could. So that kind of just added to the grief too.
Yeah.
Like not only are you dying, but now you think I'm useless. Awesome.
Right.
So I mean that intensified the grieving quite a bit. And now I find myself like, I'm not a religious guy by any means, but I find myself like looking for signs or something that he's still here or it's something. I mean, in my mind, like as I say it out loud, that sounds like it comes from left field because I don't subscribe, you know?
Right.
And I just remember I was cleaning out his car and I turned music on. He's a huge Lynyrd Skynyrd fan. And his favorite song is Freebird. And I'm cleaning out the car, I just turned my phone on, turn on Pandora, whatever. Very first song that comes on.
Oh, yeah.
Freebird. Like, come on.
Yeah.
So, like, that's got to be something, right?
I'm not a religious guy either. Like, I'm agnostic by nature and just whatever everybody believes, as long as you're not promoting violence on anybody else, good, great, love it. But there's a presence I genuinely believe, and you want to talk about coming out of left field, like when you're here and your presence is here and you do whatever it is you do, you have the effect on people that you have, and then you're taken away from this world. Like that feeling is still here. There's something that's still here. And I think it's something that we just don't fucking understand yet. But you have those moments where you're like, there's a rhyme and a reason to the universe or fucking something. And they're those little moments that you have by yourself where it's very, there's something. There's like I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you feel like now, are you doing any better than you were shortly after it happened in comparison?
It's almost worse.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think it's worse now because it's like real. And I wear every day. So I have an urn necklace with some of my dad's ashes I wear every day. And it's almost like a constant reminder that it's real.
Yeah.
And like every day I'm like, all right, let's go to school, Dad. Like, come on. And it's
the year of firsts. Like you're going to go through everything, both of you, for the first time without that parent there. Like the first Christmas, the first Valentine's Day, the first spring, the first summer. It's tough.
And that was one of the first things that was brought up to me by a friend of mine. She's our local state rep. Her name's Jackie Haas, and she also runs the Helen Wheeler Center. So she's very much involved in mental health. And I sit on a local veteran panel with her where we're trying to, affect some change on a legislative level. And I went to the meeting 5 days after my mother passed. It was like the first thing I went to go do out in public because I gave myself a few days. And she saw me and she knew what had happened. So we had our meeting. And then after the meeting, she just like walked up to me. We have a good relationship. She just gave me a big hug. And she lost her father, I think within the past year. And the first thing she said to me was like, it's going to be the year of firsts.
Yep. Yeah.
And she said, it's going to be hard. But, the one thing that everybody has told me that has been so helpful is like when you lose a parent, you'll you'll hear from so many people, hopefully, if you have a good safety net around you, you'll hear from people in your life that have been through similar things, that have also lost their parents, and you had no fucking idea. And these people will come to you, and they don't have any magic pill. They don't have any magic anything, but they let you know that they've been there. And that feeling of not being alone is one of the only comforts I think you can get. And people will apologize and be like, that have been through it, and say, listen, I'd love to tell you it gets better, but it doesn't. You know, you just learn how to cope with it better.
Yeah.
But that's the most practical fucking advice you can give. You don't want to lie to somebody and be like, no, it's going to be totally fine. You're going to be great.
Yep.
I would way rather have people tell me, like, and I appreciate that people are like, it's going to be really hard. You're going to go through this year of firsts and all this other stuff, because it's just, nothing makes the pain go away. But knowing you're not alone, I think, is the only comfort you can really get.
Yeah.
Right?
I connected. So my wife and I have been married for 9 years now, and I can probably count on one hand the times I genuinely connected with her dad, like on a like a son-in-law, father-in-law, like a real level. And we were at one of Gavin's baseball games. Gavin's my son, for those who don't know, one of his baseball games, and my father-in-law, his dad had passed away at an early age. And dude, we connected, and in that moment, it just, like you said, it was awesome.
Comfort.
It was just what I needed.
Because it's just somebody letting you know, like, I get it, and it sucks. And one of the things that I think really is important and effective in building a strong relationship, whether it's with your friends, your family, whoever, is having some sort of mutually shared struggle.
Yeah.
I think. You know what I mean? Because I think that's also part of like what makes the bond in the military so strong, is because we were all embracing the suck, right? We were all dealing with it together. And because of that, it gives you the relationship with your brothers and sisters where decades after your time in service, you call one of them up and it's like you fucking saw him yesterday.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so again, yes, like, it's comforting to have people reach out. And with the work that I do in the community, like, I had a lot of people in the community come out and talk to me and come to the visitation and reach out to me offline and shit. And the other thing that's so profound to me is there's so many people, and it's going to sound dumb as I say it, but like, you know, you're going through life and you deal with all the people that you deal with. You see the people that you see at the grocery store, the gas station, whatever organization you're a part of, but you don't really know them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you go through some shit, and then they're like, hey, well, my mother was on hospice too. We lost her a few years ago. And you're like, holy fuck, it just added like a whole new layer to these people in your life. And again, you know, you're just looking for whatever comfort that you can get. But when it comes to caring for your parent.
Yep.
So like, that's something that we dealt with. And I felt like caring for your parent, if you've ever had a loved one go into hospice or anything like that, like, it's a different type of stress.
Yeah.
Because hospital Eric, when I was dealing with my mom in the hospital, was 100% different. Was like, you know, 180 degrees different than Eric over at mom's house trying to help her out while she was under hospice. Because like, at the hospital, you have a staff that's there 24/7, right? Yep. And they're the ones that are pretty much doing everything, and you're just coming in there and hanging out. But like, you know, at home, you guys are it. It's you and your family. Yeah. And like I said, uplifted care, the nurses there, the CNAs, they're fucking phenomenal. Social workers, the chaplains, every single person I talked to was outstanding. But my dad and I realized that we were getting burned out. And then there comes this guilt, because it's like, dude, this is your fucking mom. Like, what? You're getting you should be going over there right now, and you're at the gym right now. You should be doing this for her right now, and you're doing this. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And then I realized, because when my mom first went under the home hospice stuff, like for the first, I don't know, couple of weeks, I was there like 3 to 4 times a day. And that's not, you know, she doesn't live far. She's like, less than 30 minutes away from my house. But like I was back and forth and then doing the nonprofit shit and then my other job and then everything else I'm doing, trying to be, a father and a husband. And I was getting so burned out and my dad was getting so burned out. And then like I realized my dad did a phenomenal job caretaking, because you talk about love and you talk about understanding what love is. And then you see somebody take care of their partner on hospice.
Yeah.
Nah, dude, that's some different shit. That's love. You know what I mean? And like my dad, he didn't fucking complain. Like he did it. And you could tell he was tired. You could tell he was getting frustrated, but he took it like a champ. He had zero medical experience and he wasn't thrown off by anything. Like cleaning up, because my mom was bedridden.
Yeah.
She couldn't get up, so she needed help going to the bathroom, eating everything, changing out the portable suction unit. And no matter what it was, my dad didn't make my mom feel like, oh, this is gross. Oh, this is weird. Yeah. And like, I commend him so fucking much for that. But like when he started getting frustrated, I talked to him and I was like, hey, maybe you need to, get out of your head for a few days. Why don't you go? And he went to our family's cabins in northern Wisconsin for a little while. And then I stayed at my parents' house and I tried to like carry the burden and carry it as much as I could. And my dad got back and I realized like I needed to slow down just a little bit. Like I'm still going over there every day, but maybe not 3 to 4 times a day. And I need to not fucking guilt myself about it, because I needed to know the one benefit that I got, like if you even want to fucking call it a benefit, is when my mom went into the hospital and I knew what the hell was going on, I said to myself, like, I can't run from this. And when it came to like my issues transitioning back into the civilian world, like I was always running from shit. Like, I deployed a bunch and then I took all these jobs where I was never here. And I was always, because I wanted to be alone, I didn't want to be around other people. I was always fucking running from whatever it is that I am and functioning here. And like when I found that out about my mom, I said, I'm not fucking running again. Like I can't do that. And whatever way this goes, I cannot say that I have any regrets. And so when she was up at Edward Hospital, there were times where Edward Hospital's like an hour drive-ish from here.
Yeah.
There were times where I would be up there with my dad, like most of the day, and then we would come home, and then I would say to myself, nope, and I would get back in my car and I'd fucking drive right back up there again, and then I'd spend the night up there. And I brought my fucking guitar up there one night. One night when she was really sick, I just held her hand, and I just did whatever the fuck I could, because I just knew that like, I'm her son. This is what I'm going to fucking do. And then when the day comes, I'm going to think about these moments, and hopefully she's going to think about these moments. Yeah. And so that was like the one thing that I got out of it, stretching out. But I don't know if that makes it any easier of a fucking pill to swallow, because when that call came through, when my dad texted me, "Are you awake?" Like it still hit me like, in the back of my head, I was mad at myself because I was like, I was being a little hopeful. Like literally the week before, I was talking to Uplifted Care about the graduation process from hospice. Because they were talking about how if someone's doing so well, like they can get out. And I was getting mad at myself because of the hope that I was building up in my own fucking head. Yeah. But she was doing better. And so in my head, I'm like, maybe she's going to be okay. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like, that was so... It was still so hard when it fucking happened. Yeah. Now, and Melanie, so based on what had happened with you, being that it was so sudden, now that you're looking at it and you've dealt with it, and you are dealing with it, and you feel like you're dealing with it in a much more constructive and productive way, based on the nature of what happened, it's always going to be fucking terrible. But when it comes to losing a parent, do you think that something happening immediately versus something happening over, 1 month, 5 months, do you think it even fucking matters? Like, is one better than any other? Does it not even? I think
it's just two completely different types of trauma.
Completely different types of trauma is a really good way to put that.
One's immediate, one is unfortunately a little more pulled out over time, but both are very traumatic instances, and both impact people heavily. So it's one of those things where I don't think the how or the why or anything matters. Like, it's just you go through the loss and then here it is. Like, it's traumatic. It's traumatic.
Did you guys get mad that life continued?
Yes.
I got so pissed off that people were smiling and still going to work and living their lives and doing things. And I just wanted to sit on the couch and do absolutely nothing and just be pissed off. And the rest of the world should have sat on the couch with me and did absolutely nothing.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because throughout the entire process, like, it was such a struggle when my mom was up at the hotel, having the good days and bad days, having, doctors say, hey, there's this thing that we can try. And then, oh, that thing didn't fucking work. And there was, like, I can't tell you how many times I've cried in the fucking parking lot of Edward Hospital, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, exactly what you said. Like, you're just so mad that the world's still turning.
Yep.
And then you know that it's ridiculous, but you almost feel like you should have some Professor X type of power where, like, I should be able to tap into everybody's brains. Everybody should know how fucking shitty of a situation this is. Yep. And you guys should all be feeling it too, because that's how important of a person that my mom is to me. Your dad is to you.
Yep. That's when you learn that, like, the world doesn't stop for your grief. Like, everything just keeps going. Like,
and like now with social media too, like, you're dealing with that, and you get on social media and you're pissed off that people are just talking about whatever the fuck they're doing, which is the normal thing that they're doing on social media. You get mad about all of it.
I thought you were going to say, like, the memories. That
also sucks. Yeah, not a fan of
that.
That,
like, flood your Facebook page or whatever. It's like, do you remember when you were having a great time with your dad 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And like, people will try to comfort you. And again, like I was saying before, while it's incredibly comforting, sometimes it's also very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And because you never know at what process of what stage of grief you're in at the moment, like, sometimes you're just not ready. Sometimes you can talk about it. Sometimes you can't. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have told me that, you don't always need to be the strong one when it comes to dealing with, like, my mother's passing. And the thing of it is like, I don't feel like I am being anything other than how I feel.
Yeah.
And I'm just going with whatever the fuck that is. And one thing that I have just kind of innately, I guess, is like, if I see other people crying, like, I will usually stop crying. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's because, like, I feel like I have to take care of them or something or whatever. Cause like my wife, had also an extremely close relationship with my mother. Like, they loved each other. They would talk all the time. So obviously hit my wife very hard too. And so when I would see my wife, having her emotional reaction to everything, like, it would help me kind of slow down a little bit. And my dad does the same thing, because throughout this entire process, there were times, like, my dad does not cry much. And before all this happened, I've seen my dad cry, I think once, when his father passed, maybe. And like, obviously it happened a lot more, going through everything that we went through with my mother. But when I would cry around my dad, like, my dad would be the guy, like, he would slow down and he would be like, hey, he would be the one to kind of pick me back up again. And then I would be the one to do that for him. But like, we talk about those moments that live rent free in your head.
Yeah.
And watching your father, like the last. So, and again, I know that it's going to take, I don't know, 1 billion years of therapy to work through some shit like that.
Yeah.
How do you, from your perspective, Melanie, how do you process and, like, those types of framed picture memories of traumatic situations? Because you don't want to run from it, right?
Right.
That's why your mind, like, blacks some of this stuff out, and you have to go through EMDR or something like that to bring it back to the surface. But what's your opinion on how you deal with those types of specific memories?
Yeah. So for me, as I brought them back up and started to go through them, like, I really had to sit with, like, certain key moments. So I remember sitting with kind of the moment that the words were said to me and kind of how I initially felt. And then I jumped to the moment that I walked in, because she had an open casket ceremony before she was cremated, and I wanted to go in by myself. It was very important to me that I went in that room by myself. And so I remember walking in. and walking down, and I had to process that memory of like the first time I saw my mom deceased in the coffin. And like there were just certain parts that we had to go through that were key to me being able to talk about it now and not have it like immediately impact my behavior and my emotions to make me, go off. Like it was a very different experience because I'm listening to what you guys are saying, and there are parts of that I can't necessarily relate to. Like I didn't have the big support system when I came back to the service. Although those were my people, we were all very new. Like I had just been in that unit for like a very short period of time. I wasn't super close to people. And again, the mission came first. So I didn't really have like a group to take me in. And I was the one who was kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. You kind of jogged my memory, Brad, when you said that like you were angry that the world kept going. I remember being in the headspace of the world has to keep going. And that was another key memory I had to process, was getting through the airport, seeing my dad and sister, and then getting on the elevator. And I remember saying something to my dad, or he said something to me about the World Cup score that day, like the teams that were playing. And my sister, who was about 12 at the time, emotionally appropriate for a 12-year-old, lost it and was like, "Why are you guys talking about football? Mom just died." And I was just like, man, like it was interesting to see like the complete opposite end of grief, because I was determined that the world was going to keep going and didn't process that till over 10 years later. So yeah.
And was that because of your military mindset, or is that just who you are?
So that was my military mindset. And then that fed into a lot of who I became, because again, as we've talked about in the past, your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 26. So my brain wasn't fully developed. I was 18 years old. And so this affected my ACE scoring. And this was like a big hit to me, because I'm right on the brink of no longer being a child and just coming into adulthood. So for me, the timing definitely added to everything. And then, it took a long period of time, because it's hard to grieve when there's like an attached, like open court case, because the individual who did it was arrested. And then I had to go through all of that stuff. And it was such a drawn out, uncomfortable process that I ran and I ran and I ran. And it wasn't until I processed it all these years later that I was like, man, like, this is a different level of like grief and like trauma. And it felt so good to be able to finally feel all the stages, like real time in a safe space, and like take those breaths. And like, I could feel my body like becoming less tense as I went through the EMDR. Like I was physically and emotionally letting go of like years of like stored up, just like anger and pissed offness and everything else that I was feeling. So.
Well, yeah, because again, too, the nature of, I mean, I don't know what stages you think you really ruminated on the most. Was anger one of the probably most dominant ones?
I was angry for so long. I was angry for so long. Just couldn't process what had happened, was angry when, originally we were told that the individual could face up to 44 years because this wasn't the first offense. So he had previously been drinking and driving, hit a woman who was driving, and she had broken her arm and like bruised some of the ribs. And so he had done like a year and a half for, bodily injury to someone while under the influence. And now here he's killed my mom, and he's charged with homicide by intoxicated use of a vehicle, which in Wisconsin carried up to like a 45-year penalty. And I would have liked to see that carried out, because obviously you didn't learn the first time. Right. And so I think when all was said and done, he got 15 years, and then it got pled down to like between 7 and 9. And that infuriated me. That was just ripping it all open again. Yeah. And then I remember years later, reading the police report and having to process through that, and finding out that after the accident, he went home to sober up. So like he didn't even like go to see, like it wouldn't have mattered because she died instantly, but he didn't even like go over to check. Like he went home and sobered up and called somebody.
Because he was worried about himself.
And then they went back however many hours later. So to just think that she died alone in that moment, was alone, and then was left alone. Like that was hard. Because
that's not even,
Like, that's not even one traumatic experience that there was one traumatic experience of losing your mother, and then the other traumatic experience of what the fuck happened and all the fallout that comes with it that you also have to deal with.
Yep.
Because, like you said, like it not normalizes or whatever, but when you're going through the court case, when you're doing the paperwork with hospice, when you're doing all this other shit after your parent had passed away, it's so hard for me to wrap my mind around how like this is a normal process that other people do as part of their jobs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're just sitting there trying to wrap your mind around it. And your brain is just like the box is open and just things are going everywhere. And it's so hard for you to focus and even understand what's going on, much less process any new information. And then you have somebody sitting in front of you with a clipboard and a piece of paper that's like, okay, so what did she do this? Does she need that? Blah, blah, blah. You're like, I don't fucking know. You know what I mean? And so I can't imagine how difficult it was to deal with both of those separate issues. But I'm just, again, at this point now, do you feel like you have your grief under control? Or what do you, again, from your professional perspective, what do you think people should be striving for in a grieving process? Because again, it's never going like away.
Right.
What's the right words to even use there?
Right. I think for me, the ultimate like end goal of where I was able to get is now I can talk freely and openly about my mom. Like I don't shut down that conversation. I'm able to bring back like positive memories and focus on those. I'm able to talk through her passing without completely falling apart. I'm less angry. I'm definitely less angry. Like the anger in the last few years for me is like completely subsided. I feel completely different. And so I think the end goal is to get to a place where you can think about the person in a healthy way and not like immediately lock up and go to a negative emotion. It's to be able to think and be like, okay, I can sit with this for a second. I loved her. We have good memories, and then keep going. So I think that is the ultimate goal, I would hope.
Yeah. Now, how did, and Brad, how did your kids deal with everything, being that your kids are the same age as mine's, right? So your oldest is what, 5, 6?
My oldest is going to be 8.
Sorry,
Okay.
your oldest
Yeah.
is going to be 8. So
Yeah.
How did they deal with everything, and how are they doing?
At the time, my wife and I, we sat him down on the couch. And well, my wife did most of the talking, obviously, but we said that Grandpa's sick, and he's probably not going to get better because I wrestled in my mind for the longest time. Do I take my kids to go see him like that? Do I let them have the memory of my dad, how he was? Because when my grandma passed away, I was 13, and my mom made the decision that I should probably say my goodbyes. And that was one of those things. I didn't know how to process that as a 13-year-old kid. So, dude, I grieved and was angry about my grandma's death for years. So I was like, I don't want to do that to my kids. But on the other hand, I don't want to not let them say what they have to say to their grandpa. I mean, I know they're 8 and 5, but that doesn't mean that they don't have things that they want to say to him.
Yeah.
So, they cried, a little bit, and they just periodically, my daughter will just be in the shower and then she'll just randomly start crying, and she'll be like, "Grandpa," and it's just like, dude, what do you do? Like, what do I do in that moment? I don't
know what Melanie thinks, but I mean, I think you just let them know that it's okay that they feel that way.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. It's healthy to cry. It's healthy to feel sad. It's normal to feel sad right now because we lost somebody we love.
Yeah. And I think, and that's usually, we let her cry down. I'm like, it's okay. And then when she kind of calms down, I'm like, what's a good memory you have of Grandpa? What's something fun you did together?
Yeah.
And it's just like little things, man. It's just like we had teddy bears made out of his shirts.
That's a good idea.
And the one that I have, of course, are like Marine Corps shirts. And it's like Proud Dad. And it's just like, Jesus, dude.
Yeah.
It's just so heavy.
Yeah.
Because my oldest, she's 5. And when we were at Edward, we couldn't bring the kids up there because like COVID rules and all that other shit. And my mom was always watching my daughters. Like she would come over all the time, and my daughters were just, no matter what they were doing, when Lola, and Lola's Tagalog for grandma, when Lola would come into the house, them kids didn't give a fuck about me. Like they were just like, whatever. And they would just run to her and hug her and all that other stuff. And so it was very hard on them for them not getting to see their Lola. Yeah. And so when she was at Edward, testament to, her name was Dr. Cole up at Edward. She was I made a post about this on my Facebook page, but she was my first point of contact at Edward. And I unnecessarily, unfortunately took out a little bit of my anger on her. And I did it in a sarcastic fashion, just a cutting tone. But when I first met with her, when my mom was up at Edward the first day, the first thing Dr. Cole said to me was she was talking to me about hospice options. And then part of me was like, fuck you. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? And I didn't mean to. She was doing her job. She was young. You could tell she was new at her job. She was doing her fucking best. And immediately I get mad. I'm like, don't talk to me about hospice with my mom right now. I'm focused on her getting better right now. I don't want to talk about that shit. And then as time went on, she was my point of contact. When surgeries didn't work out, she was the one who called me to tell me. When it was terminal, she was the one who told me. And like at the very end of everything, she said, hey, we're going to have to send her to hospice. We're going to do inpatient here. And I just said, can I bring my daughters here? Mm-hmm. And it was the first time I ever saw her lose her professional bearing at all, because she was insanely professional, where like I could hear her voice starting to crack. Yeah. And she just said, let me figure something out. And because it was still against the rules for the hospital. And she was the fucking one that got a portable unit so my mom could come home and be on hospice. And so she came into my mom's room and she was crying. And she told my mom, I found a portable unit so you can go home. And like, I'll be forever fucking in debt to her for that. And I just feel so bad because when because of the sarcastic and cutting tone that I had with her, like it just, again, reiterates the amount of respect you need to have for professionals that are doing that shit every fucking day, all day. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. And so when she came home on hospice, I took my oldest daughter, because my youngest is only 2.5. She doesn't really understand. But I took my oldest daughter out. I got her some ice cream, went to the park, and I sat her down next to me, and I just told her what was happening and what they think is going to happen. And, she's 5 years old. And so I didn't know if this was the right way to go about it based on her age. But I always default towards giving information. Yep. Like, if I don't know what to do, I'm at least going to try to make sure that you know exactly what the fuck is going on and be transparent. And like, she asked me a bunch of questions. And at first she was kind of like a giggly, almost 5-year-old, just being silly about it. Yeah. And then I saw the moment where she understood. Mm-hmm. And then she started crying. And then seeing your daughter cry like that, I fucking started crying. Yeah. And then I told her, like, it's okay that we're crying, because this is what we should be doing. Yeah. And then I try to talk to her about how, like, this is what we do with this, okay? And then from there, I brought her over. That same day, I brought her over to see my mom, and like, she was drawing pictures for her. She was doing really well with it. And then I also got her enrolled in, not enrolled, but I signed her up for, Uplifted Care has a grief counseling for children. Okay. And so my wife, she took it upon herself, which was genius on her end. She was just like, I want to get my kids signed up for this, whatever the fuck it is. You know what I mean? Whatever resources exist out there, because there's so many, like, let's get our kids into it. And so we got Lily, my oldest, into, some grief counseling and all that other kind of stuff, just so she could process things. And like just last night, at the end of every day, I get to do something with my kids. I just call it talk about life. Mm-hmm. And so before we go to bed, before my daughters go to bed, they're in separate rooms now, but my oldest will say, hey, Dad, can we lay in bed and talk about life? And I'm like, fuck yeah. And so we lay in bed, and I let her talk to me about whatever she wants to talk to me about. She asked me questions about the world. She asked me about sharks and tornadoes and all sorts of other shit. And we just talk, because I don't get that opportunity, right? And last night, she asked me about my mom, like for the first time since she passed. And like, it was really heavy and it was emotional, but not in like a really sad way, because Lily was just like, what was mom like when you were a kid? What did mom cook? What did Lola cook for you when you were a kid? What did Lola do? How did she dress you when you were a kid? And so I'm just thankful that for me, one of the biggest things that's been also helpful is having children, because it's like, it's so painful when you lose your parent and you hold on to those good memories, those beautiful memories and those things that they taught you. And you look at your kids and then you have that moment where you realize like, well, I mean, it's on me now. Like, I got to take the gifts that my parents gave me, that my mother gave me, that my father gave me, and I got to give that to my kids.
Yeah.
And like soon, the day after I found out it was terminal, I took the day off work and I took my kids to the park. And I just sat there with them at the park and watched them play. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, you're also letting yourself know, like you guys both said earlier, that life goes on. It's going to go on no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I hope that was the right way to handle that with my kids, but it's kind of hard, I guess.
I think the taking her to a grieving like therapist or session, I think that was a phenomenal decision. Just speaking from experience, dude, if I could have gone to I went to therapy when I was 13 after my grandma passed, but it didn't really, I didn't stick with it,
Well, again, in my opinion, we've talked about this before in this episode and outside of it, like mental health is so weird, like because you just expect people to say, okay, well, go see a therapist and that'll do everything. It's like, nah, man, it's a collective fucking thing. Like you have your family, you have your friends that are like, hey, you're going through some shit. It's going to suck. We're going to be here for you. This is why you should go do this and talk to this person. And we're going to be there for you and encourage you in doing whatever that therapist told you to do, whatever they told you to practice, whatever they told, like however you need to deal with it. Like it's a collective effort. It's not just point A, point B. You go to therapist and you're better. Like it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And to put the emphasis on it, especially when a kid is, when you're dealing with a kid, is so important, because now you got to let them know, one, it's normal to go to go talk to a therapist. That's fucking normal. These emotions that you're feeling are normal, and like it's okay because you're around other people that are feeling it too. And this is what we're all doing together. Like we're doing this together. We're grieving together. It's not just you have to go do it by yourself. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think. I mean, I don't know. But then how old are your kids, Melanie?
They just turned 13 and 15 last week.
I saw that you celebrated their birthdays at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
In like Orlando?
Yeah.
What?
We went
How
down
was
there
that?
for the Halloween Horror Nights.
Oh, okay.
It was cool.
Nice.
It was cool.
And so now, how has it been for you as far as like trying to carry your mother's legacy onto your kids? I mean, because they would have been, how long ago was that for them?
Yeah. So unfortunately, my mom never got to meet either one of my kids. Like I didn't have them until, later. And so for me, because I was closed off and angry for so long, like we didn't talk about my mom. And like my kids knew that. Like they knew that like, don't talk about her, don't bring her up. Like we avoid that. And so it wasn't until I started to go through healing that like I opened back up to them, was like, hey, like, is there anything you'd like to know? And then we've been able to like have more of those conversations. Now I can sit and go through, unfortunately 2006 was like MySpace time. So like I don't have a whole lot other than like printed out pictures, but now we can go through them and I can talk about things. And if they have questions, I can answer them and like recall the positive memories. And so, yeah, it was a very unique situation to go through those milestones of having two children and not having your mom there. So, yeah. And
so then, as far as everything is concerned when it comes to losing a parent and how grief works and how complicated grief is, and trying to just get to a space where you are comfortable with the reality of losing a parent, which is what, acceptance is. I think it's just also so important to understand that just because you reach acceptance doesn't mean you're not going to fucking bounce around to those other stages. You know what I mean? And just go right back to depression and anger and bargaining and denial and all that other bullshit. And then you're like, okay, like you were saying, kind of what you're dealing with. You know what I mean? You're bouncing all around it still. And then you get to those moments where you're like, okay, I'm in it. And then again, you're doing okay again. You know what I mean? But I think it's so important to understand that it's okay to be dealing with that.
Did you ever give up hope? Like with your mom, or were you hopeful the entire time? Because that is probably, I was hopeful with my dad up until he was like, I'm done with treatment. That's it. And I was like, all right, you've made a decision. You're tired. Because with the type of cancer my dad had, even if he did 86 rounds of chemo, it was going to come back. It was going to come back.
I was hopeful the entire time, which yes, is like another degree of just emotionally exhausting trauma, I think, because my mom, the cancer essentially formed like a cocoon around her organs, like in her abdomen. And how do you give up hope? And my mom is so strong. Like my mom came here from the fucking Philippines when she was 30. Okay. And I've said this before. She grew up as a little girl washing her clothes in a fucking river and then scrubbing the clothes against the rocks until her knuckles bled to try to get stains out. Like she was tough as shit. You know what I mean? And so it was I could never give up hope. And she was so solid and unshakable the entire time. And the only moments, like there's 3 moments that lived rent-free in my head from the whole thing. The first one was when my dad called me at the golf course and I heard his voice break. And the first thing my dad said was, you know, as he started to kind of get a little emotional, he just said, your mom never did anything wrong. Like, because she never drank, she never smoked, she didn't do any of that kind of stuff. And when, like, that moment lives in there. And then there was a moment in the hospital where my mom looked at me and said, I don't want to die. And like that one was just like, would we go to therapy for that? And then the last one was when I saw her, you know, at her house when I opened that front door and I saw her body there. And well, you know, that and the last time I kissed her forehead after she passed, and you feel that cold.
Yeah. And it's so quick.
Yeah.
My dad, like I said, he passed at 9:17. I'll never forget. He was laying and he had this machine and it would like suck his spit and like mucus out.
Like a portable suction unit?
Yeah. And he would use it, and the nurse was on, so the bed, I'm looking at the bed. So I'm standing at the foot of the bed. The nurse was on the left side. My sisters were on the right side. And my oldest sister, he started like kind of like choking a little bit and like couldn't breathe. And my oldest sister was like, Brittany, grab his thing, grab the suction thing, because he needed like, it was some kind of medicine, and it like you could replace it. So she was like, grab the thing, he needs it, hurry. And his eyes just, you could see they just glossed over. And my oldest sister, she was like, Dad, take your thing, like, Dad, take it. And I was just like standing there because I had no idea.
Right.
My middle sister, who was getting yelled at to like grab the thing, she had no idea what was going on. My oldest sister was like just trying to like get his attention, and like she just kept like, she was crying. She's like, Dad, come back, Dad, you know, like, and just at 9:17 it happened. We closed it. Like my brother-in-law was a nurse. He went over and like closed his eyes, so obviously. And then by like 9:22, cold as ice, dude. I mean, just that's it, and that was it.
It's a surreal feeling.
Yeah,
and you hold their hand and you kiss their forehead and you hug them, and you can feel that the life is not there anymore.
And I hate the fact that like, and I know that the nurse is just trying to do her job and stuff, and she's like, well, he's got 7, your hearing is the last thing to go, so say what you need to say, like just and I'm like, oh my God, I've got like 3 minutes to just say everything that I have to say through my tears and through my like the confusion and my sisters, and that was it. And then, like I said, he just laid there for hours and he was just there.
And how heavy of a thing is that to ask somebody like, okay, go say your last things to your mom, to your dad. You know what I mean? Like,
how you take 30 years of like feeling, you know what I mean? Like, how do I?
You just think about what you would want somebody to say to you, I guess, You know what I mean? Which would just be
And I don't even.
that they're loved.
Yeah.
Just let them know that they're loved. And that's all you can say. And like for me, I have a fucked up sense of humor. So I would just assume that my kids would want to talk to me about my car's extended warranty or something before I left. But
Yeah. And then like spreading ashes. I don't know if you've ever
we're going to.
had to spread ashes. But I spread my dad's ashes by, he loved baseball. And we went on a trip, and one of the stops was the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Nice.
And right down the street, I don't know if you've ever been to like Cooperstown, New York, but right down the street, there's like this beautiful lake, and it's like mountainous. And I spread his ashes there. And it was just one of the hardest things, I think, because just months ago, this was somebody you loved and you cared about, and now you're carrying around a sandwich baggie
Yeah.
of dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, geez.
But at least you got to spread his ashes in a place that he would care about, like that he loved. Because we're going to do the same thing for my mother. She loved the cabins that my family has in northern Wisconsin. So part of the ashes are going to go up there. And then the other part is going to go to the Philippines with her family. So her brother came out here, and we're going to send them part of her ashes out there, and then I'm going to try to go out there with them so we can spread them out there. And Mel, you said your mother was cremated as well. And what did you guys do?
So actually still have them in like a memorial box.
Nice.
And so I think, in the future when my dad passes, he'll be cremated as well. And, maybe like at that point, I'm not sure what'll happen, but yeah, still have them at this point in time.
I like that there's companies out there or businesses that can take the ashes, like you said, with your dad's necklace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
the necklace with my mom's ashes.
And
you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's cool because on the necklace I got, like I said, his favorite song was Free Bird. So in the necklace it says free as a bird.
It's a great fucking song.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the solo to that song, if there was a song I was going to go out to, it would be to the solo in Freebird or My Way by Frank Sinatra. I would go out to one of those fucking songs.
Yep. On a more like positive note though, the way that like when people pass away, they're doing things now instead of just burying people. So I looked into it. There's a thing where you can, I don't know what they do to your body, but you become a coral reef, and they like plant you in the ocean and you sprout a new coral reef.
Come back as a coral reef.
My wife showed me something where you can, after you pass, they do something similar, but like a tree grows out of you or something.
Yeah. And I'm just, because there's only so much space
in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be a problem for somebody at some point.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah, I think those ideas are awesome. Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to do it for me, just because then what if somebody comes across me as a tree, like in a really weird middle interim space? There's like a face, and then there's just a tree growing out. Like that's kind of, I don't know if I like that either. I would probably just donate my body to science, is what I've talked to my wife about. Like organs, whatever people can use, take them.
Yep.
And then I personally, did it make you guys look at your own lives and think about your own inevitable death at any point when you lost your parents, or did that never really?
So for me, it was like, I went through this stage where it's like, why am I sad? This is inevitable. Like, it's going to happen to everybody. Yeah. And I talked to people about it, and I was like, I know it's sad because obviously I love my dad very much, and this sucks that he's not here, but dude, it's going to happen. And I just kept replaying. I was like, I have to do this 4 more times or whatever. Like, my mom and then my wife's parents, and just like, I can't emotionally, just like, it's exhausting. I can't.
Yeah.
So I think I've been trying to process and realize that death is real, it's inevitable, and just make the best of the time that we have here.
Yeah, I would say so. Melanie, what about you? Did it the way that everything happened with you and your mother? Did that make you really kind of contemplate your own life and death and that kind of stuff, or not so much?
Not so much at the time. Like I said, I jumped right into that. I didn't care. So my mind was just, well, if she's gone, then what I do from this point forward doesn't matter because I don't have her anymore. So it wasn't until way down the line that I was able to say, okay,
Yeah.
now I need to think about this. And, like you'd mentioned earlier, like donating your body to science, that's what I plan on doing too.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful, especially if you've had like health ailments along the way, to let, the students look at that kind of stuff. It's a learning opportunity, and then, take the rest. And I'd like the idea of becoming a coral reef.
Right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's pretty dope.
could you imagine being a little coral reef with like a face? Like
Scaring the shit out of a scuba diver.
Yep.
that sounds like, I'm down for that idea.
They would have to change. They would have to scientifically change the name to clownfish, like, because it's not funny. There's nothing funny about seeing a face in a coral reef.
Well, and I think that too. It made me think about the first thing that I did the day my mom passed. Hours after, as soon as I got home, I took my computer, I opened it up, and I wrote a letter to my kids.
Mm.
And I just wrote a letter to them to tell them, like, this is what I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
Because one day you might be going through this. And if I have it my way, it sounds fucked up, you will be going through this, because I want to pass away before my kids, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when that day comes, I want you to know that it's okay. And so I wrote them a letter, because whenever I'm done, whenever I'm out of here, I don't know what of me is still going to be here for my kids and my family, my friends, to get something from. But I sure as hell don't want some big drawn out funeral. I don't want any of that other stuff. From the funerals that I've gone to, from my friends' parents and my own mother, I think the most beautiful thing that can be done when somebody passes is just getting people together and talking, like having conversations. The thing with the funeral stuff is like there's one person that's up there, and that one person's talking, whether it's a religious thing or whatever, and everybody's just kind of sitting there and crying and looking at pictures, and everybody leaves. But I'd been to a friend of mine, her father passed away, and they had a backyard barbecue, and there was like 200 people there, and there was pictures everywhere, and people are still having their emotional reactions, right? But like, it's in a beautiful space. It's a different type of vibe, and you're like, it's okay that I'm feeling this way, and now let's talk about all this the good memories that we have, because we have the place to do that. I'm like, that's the kind of shit that I want.
I was just going to bring that up, actually. So my dad was religious. His family was, so that was his sister's request, like, can we have a service for your dad? So we did a service, and then instead of doing like a luncheon or whatever, we had a celebration of life at one of the bars that my dad hung out with all of his buddies, and we had it. His favorite beer was Busch Light, and we had Busch Light on tap, or like whoever wanted a Busch Light on dad, you know what I mean? Have a Busch Light, and we hung out at one of the local bars, and there was probably, like you said, 150, 200 people. And we just shared memories. There was pictures. And we just laughed and we cried and we had a good time. And I found out things about my dad and heard things that I had never heard. And it was a nice way to remember my dad, and to not. It was almost like a pause from the grieving.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see the amount of love and support, not only for like my dad, but like all my friends came, and my sister's friends came, and just like everybody, we just all came together and we celebrated.
And I think, again, it's just super important to be there for the people in your life that have gone through that, because like you said, we are very thankful and we're very lucky that despite all the shitty situations that we've had those people, and we've gotten to have those moments. Whereas, like Melanie was saying, she didn't necessarily get to have all those kind of moments because of what she went through on her end. Yeah. But then obviously it's important to let everybody know, regardless of when it happened, that, hey, like, you are loved now.
Oh, for sure.
You are with people now. Yeah. Like, we are a growing family that takes care of one another. You know what I mean? But anyway, so I know I think we're about out on time. I think we did pretty good. I think we only used a couple of Kleenexes, so that's not bad.
Yeah.
In closing of this, did either one of you have anything else you wanted to say about the process of losing your mother, for Melanie losing her father? Anything else?
I don't think I have.
No, just the reminder that there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and that it's a process and
resources.
Yeah,
resources.
So
I think to anybody out there that's dealt with anything, that's been struggling with anything, a couple of things that I found that were beneficial for me. So like I said, locally in Kankakee County, I used Uplifted Care. They were very beneficial for us every step of the way, letting us know what to expect, how to deal with it, providing grief services for my children. That was huge. The other resource, obviously, family, friends, people that have been through similar things, and then books. So for me, I've talked about this book a billion fucking times, but I'll talk about it a billion more. Man's Search for Meaning, Dr. Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite fucking books. That was a book that I read multiple times throughout this process because it was a story, obviously, about Dr. Frankl and his struggles going through the Holocaust. And then I also, another book that I recommend is called Siddhartha by Herman Hesse. It was about 100 years old. A really good book, referred to me by one of my best friends when I was going through a struggle before all this. And it's just a story about the Buddha. And again, I'm an agnostic dude, but it's about how he became the Buddha through his struggles. And it's just a very well written book for anybody that's going through anything. So those were a few of the resources that I found. What about you guys?
Music.
Yes.
Yeah.
Music's a big one.
Music. And we were talking about the other day, I've recently discovered a passion for hiking because it doesn't require vision, and I'm able to just breathe and just clear my mind and just feel at ease with everything. So music and hiking, I think, are my go-tos.
Yeah, nature is huge for sure. I know I said that earlier and I just completely blanked on it. But yeah, just being out there in it, because I think it makes you understand that you're part of something so much bigger than yourself. The world can still be beautiful even in such a shitty time. So yeah, that's an excellent point. What about you, Melanie? Anything else you think are great resources?
Just therapy, I think, definitely talking to someone, getting through that period initially is really beneficial in the long run. So, if you find yourself struggling with the grieving period, if you're not quite sure where your headspace is at, I think therapy is a really good place to open up and kind of dive through all of that. So,
do you have any kind of like tips or any, because going to therapy can be uncomfortable for people. Is there any way to like let people know that it's okay to go get the help that they need?
Yeah, I think just continuing to talk about it. And in the meantime, if people aren't ready, journaling is always my go-to. Like if you're not ready to talk about it with someone else, at least put the thoughts and feelings on paper so that you're not internalizing it all and going through the cycle of whatever emotions it's bringing. You've got to get it out. Like getting it out helps so much. So yeah, if not therapy, then journaling. Journaling's really beneficial.
And one of the most important points I think that needs to be made based on what you talked about, Melanie, was it doesn't matter how long ago it fucking happened. If you didn't get a chance to really process it, if you were so busy with your life, with your career, with whatever at the time that you didn't get to process one of the most difficult things any human being goes through, it's never too late to go and fucking process it, to talk to a professional, to something like that. Like it's a step, it's a part of the journey, and maybe you don't need it. Maybe you're out there and you don't need it. Good for you. But if there's a chance that you might, it doesn't fucking matter when it happened. Like go talk to somebody. You know what I mean? So last thing to end this super positive episode. One thing that I did find, on Facebook, just a couple, like literally yesterday. And these stories always make me so fucking happy when I read this kind of stuff. What?
Before you go any further, I just want to say you're aging us.
Why?
Facebook? You got your story from Facebook?
I'm going to be on Facebook forever. I'll be on Facebook forever. And a little side note about my mom, another call out on my MySpace page back in the day. I even think it was on my Zanga. What's up, 3 people who know what the fuck I'm talking about. My profile picture was my mom giving me the middle finger on Zanga.
Nice.
Yes, but no. So on Facebook, I always, the one thing I like about the fucking algorithm on Facebook is if you like a lot of like positive shit, it'll show you more positive shit.
Yeah.
And so there's this one story that I love, and being that we're getting close to Christmas, I wanted to share it. Curtis Jenkins. So Curtis Jenkins is a bus driver for Lake Highlands Elementary School. In 2018, he asked every kid on his bus route, what they wanted for Christmas. He's just a school bus driver. And then with his own money, he bought that fucking gift for every single kid on his bus. It was a total of 70 gifts. The students found out when they were picked up on December 21st of that year. So again, while there's nothing really that, takes away the pain from a lot of the things that we deal with, it's just really important to understand that there's so many wonderful people that exist that we've never met and probably never will meet that are just out there doing super great shit for people. Mm-hmm. And again, one of the only things that can give at least me comfort. So thank you guys so much for being on here, sharing your story. If anybody else has any other questions, please reach out to our Facebook page at I'm Fine. And we will talk to you guys next time.